Let's get to the bottom of it with Phil Mudd. He's our CNN counterterrorism analyst and former CIA counterterrorism official, and David Gartenstein-Ross. He's a counterterrorism analyst and senior fellow for the Foundation of Defense of Democracies. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being here to try to parse what's going on with Seymour Hersh's writing. As you know, let me start with you, Phil. Seymour Hersh disputes what Rob O'Neill, one of SEAL Team 6, says. Let me read to you from his report, from Hersh's report. He says the SEAL squad used explosives to blow the doors open without injuring anyone. One of bin Laden's wives was screaming hysterically, and a bullet, perhaps a stray round, struck her knee. Aside from those that hit bin Laden, no other shots were fired. Who are we to believe, Phil?
I got to stop laughing for a moment. I support this article, by the way. I know I'm going to shock you because as a national security guy, we get no humor in my life. This is the funniest thing I've seen in maybe 5 years. I wake up yesterday morning and see this thing, and I can't figure out, there's nothing here that's even close to true. I mean, if Tom Clancy wrote this, he'd be laughed off the street. This suggests that the White House, Navy SEALs, the Pentagon, the CIA, Saudi princes and Pakistani generals somehow got together in a room and decided that they could come up with the best conspiracy man has ever known. I wouldn't paper a bird cage with this stuff. This is just fiction. I don't know where this comes from.
David, do you see it as implausibly as Phil does?
Yeah, absolutely. Although I do think that you could paper a bird cage with fiction.
Oh, wow. Okay, hold on a second. So you both dismissed the idea that there was no firefight. There's more. Let me read to you more. And this comes into play whether or not Pakistan knew all along where bin Laden was. And some people say that that's not so much of a stretch. Here's what Seymour Hersh reports on that. Bin Laden had been a prisoner of the ISI, meaning Pakistan's CIA, at the Abbottabad compound. Stop laughing, Phil, while I read this. At the Abbottabad compound since 2006, that two senior Pakistani military leaders knew of the raid in advance and had made sure that the two helicopters delivering the SEALs to Abbottabad could cross Pakistani airspace without triggering any alarms. Phil.
Well, let's be clear here, to be serious for just 1 second. The assertion is not that somebody down the chain in the Pakistani military or security services might have known something. The assertion is that senior Pakistani generals, including the head of the security service, knew for years. So while that security service was losing officers in the fight against al-Qaeda, they were also at the same time secretly sheltering the head of al-Qaeda. I mean, let me break some news for you this morning. Aliens abducted President Obama 15 minutes ago, and Darth Vader is in the Oval Office making decisions for the United States. I have a secret source who told me that. Why don't we publish? This is nonsense. This is just ridiculous.
David, is it nonsense? Because people always questioned how bin Laden could have been so close to a Pakistan military base without anybody ever detecting him.
Well, of course, people question that, including the then director of the CIA, Leon Panetta, who went on to be Secretary of Defense. I mean, questioning the idea that there wasn't Pakistani knowledge that may have gone higher up the chain isn't exactly revolutionary, given that cabinet members were questioning it. Look, let me get to what the problem is with this story. There might be individual pieces that are true, and NBC News, for example, published kind of a rushed story which suggested that there may have actually been a source other than the U.S. just tracing down this courier. But
hold on, let me tell you that, because that's what Seymour Hersh says, that there was actually this Pakistani source, I think a former military person, who walked into the embassy and gave up bin Laden's whereabouts.
Correct. And NBC has a somewhat similar story, although it seems like they rushed to put it out in light of the Seymour Hersh story. But look, the overall problem with the Hersh story isn't that none of the components are true. There may be some components that are true in different ways, and Phil and I may disagree on which ones are more plausible. But the problem is it is a comprehensive alternative history that's based on sources that are anonymous. And if you look at how he describes the anonymous sources, it's clear that they didn't actually have direct knowledge of the events. For example, one source is described as a senior official who had information about the intelligence leading up to the raid, not about the raid itself. And then there's two consultants to SOCOM, and those consultants wouldn't have the kind of information to provide the kind of omniscience that he gives to the sources within the story. Overall, if CNN were considering a story like this, it would not pass fact-checking muster with CNN. The overall tableau is one of fiction. There may be some facts embedded within it, but he is presenting what he says is alternative definitive history, and it's impossible to take that alternative history seriously.
Phil, very quickly, before we let you go, I want to talk about a developing story out of the NSA. The NSA director said yesterday that he believes that the ISIS ideology is resonating more and more with Americans. Can you help us understand what part of that ideology is appealing, or why he would say that?
Sure. I think the real compelling part of the ISIS ideology is its simplicity. You can summarize this in about one sentence. If you're an impressionistic 15-year-old or 17-year-old, there is a place where you can practice your religion with some sense of purity. In other words, you can get to the real religion. And the story is coming from native English speakers in Syria who are able to speak to a 15 or a 17 or 19-year-old in their own language and their own idiom. Let me put two stories together here quickly. This is why Secretary of State Kerry's conversation with the Russians is so important today. This ideology is becoming so pervasive on the internet that people like me would say eventually you've got to get to the heart of this. You can't stop it in the United States or the UK. You've got to root out the evil in Syria and Iraq. And conversations with the Russians about the end game for President Assad so we can really go after ISIS in Syria are really important.
All right, Philip Mudd, David Gartenstein-Ross, glad we could provide you all some humor this morning dissecting this report.